Hello everyone, welcome back to Technologies Discussion channel. For this video, I'd like to kickstart a new topic of discussion which is on AI, artificial intelligence. Why I started this new topic is because if we live in today's world, if we do not know what is actually AI, this will be at a very strong disadvantage. So therefore, in order to force myself to learn what is AI, I believe that if I share, then I will be equally able to learn well what is actually AI. So basically, for this channel, okay, I hope I can close the gap on AI discussion. For the first part of my series discussion, I like to discuss on the components of AI. Okay, so basically over here, you can see that there are actually 5 components of AI: learning, reasoning, problem solving, perception, and language understanding. And I guess that for this video, it is almost very difficult to cover all the 5 components. So this video, I will first cover these 2 components. Then my next video, I will cover the rest of these 3 in order to fully, completely discuss under the components of AI. This is my email. If you have any question regards on this discussion, please drop me an email, okay? Or if not, I actually prefer you guys to ask me your question through the comment. Before I continue, okay, I'd like to urge you guys to help me by like this video. Just give me a few seconds. Help me press the like button now. For those who are new to this channel, or maybe you are just like me, want to learn what is actually AI, please support me by subscribing to this channel and turn on your notification bell. Once again, thank you so much for strong support. Before I kickstart the definition of AI, okay, so let me give you a analogy in order for us to understand what is actually AI. Okay, so basically, in short, AI can be just like a child brain. Okay, so basically, what does this mean? Okay, so now imagine if you need to teach a child what a cat is, what will you do? Definitely, you won't give him a textbook full of cats, a lot of pictures of cats. I am pretty sure that you won't do this. However, what you do is you will point to various animal and you probably will say that that is a cat or that is not a cat. So basically, this is what we call learning. Okay, over time, the child brain actually identified the pattern. Okay, for example, he know that the cat will have whiskers. He know that cats will have a tail. He know that the cat will have some fur. It roughly know the size of the cat and certain behavior of the cat. For example, it also can meow. So basically, all this is basically through the learning. And from there, the kids actually build a model of cat-ness. Okay, he know all the characteristics of cat. And thereafter, it will be able to correctly identify a cat, even it has not really seen it before. Okay, so basically, what does this mean? For example, the kid has not seen this cat before. However, with all the data, okay, basically they have gone through the learning, and the kid will be able to know that this is actually a cat. Okay, so basically this is what it means. Although he has not really seen this cat before, but at one glance he know that this is what we call a cat. AI works in a very similar way. It is trained on vast amount of data, thousands of cat pictures to recognize the underlying pattern itself. Okay, so this process is called machine learning, which is a primary driver of modern AI. Okay, I'll come a little bit more detail on all this. Okay, so the simple definition of AI at its core, okay, artificial intelligence is the field of computer science dedicated to creating systems capable of performing tasks that are typically require human intelligence. So basically, in short, okay, this task of AI is basically require some form of human intelligence in order to execute the job. So therefore, you probably heard that AI take away a lot of job. So basically, this is the reason why, because AI can duplicate what human intelligence is doing, and hence because of this, I am pretty sad to say that some of the job actually has been taken over by AI. So basically, in order to avoid this, we need to quickly understand what AI can do and basically we can make use of this AI to do more job. So basically, this is what I mentioned early on. Okay, so these are all the component of AI. Basically, AI gone through this stage, which is learning, reasoning, problem solving, perception, and language understanding. But again, in the interest of time, for this video, I probably can cover the first two, which is learning and reasoning. Okay, so basically, again, you can just imagine this as a project of building machine. Okay, so basically, this building machine, they can think and they can act intelligently. Okay, so basically, this hopefully give you some idea what is actually AI. Come to the first component, which is learning. Okay, so basically we need to acquire information and certain rules. Okay, so learning is a fundamental component of AI. Just now I did mention about the cat. Okay, so basically the cat, we actually learn, okay, all the feature. So basically this is what I want to quickly discuss about the learning, which is a fundamental component of AI, where machine acquire knowledge and improve their performance over time. Okay, so basically in short, you just imagine when the kid actually see limited of cats, probably he may not be able to pick up correctly what is actually cat. For example, he can take that the dog is actually a cat. However, when they actually see more and more cats, so the kids will be able to have more confidence in order to point out that this is actually a cat. So basically, this is what it means. Okay, so the machine, okay, which is the kid, acquire more knowledge and therefore they actually improve their performance, which means that they are able to successfully identify this as a cat over the time. Machine learning algorithm enable system to learn from data. Okay, so basically all these learning algorithm, we will be able to learn from the various data, for example, the picture of the cat. Okay, so basically we learn and we are able to identify patterns. For example, as I mentioned earlier on, for example, the cats has certain feature like the whiskers, tails, fur, size, and behavior, etc. Okay, so basically all this is actually identify all the patterns, and hence, with this, we are able to make some prediction or maybe make some decision based on it. By analyze large data set, machine can extract meaningful insight, recognize trend, and even adapt their behavior accordingly. Okay, so basically, this is what we know about AI. Just like our brain, the moment that we are able to identify cat, okay, you can imagine that with more information, we are able to do more meaningful. For example, we can know that, oh, certain action, the cat is actually hungry. Certain action, the cat is actually angry, etc. So this is what it means. If we have a larger data set, okay, we are able to even extract more meaningful insight. For example, the characters of the cat, whether the cat is not feeling well, etc. And basically, if we are able to do this, we are able to recognize certain trend, and then basically we will be able to adapt their behavior accordingly. Before we come into AI, let me quickly explain the word before AI. So basically, the word before AI is the tradition programming. Okay, so I guess you know what is actually programming. So in short, we basically write a very detailed instruction. Okay, we write a very detailed code. Okay, the computer will then follow this instruction exactly to produce an output. Okay, so basically, this is what I want to say based on tradition programming. Basically, we have a lot of set of data and we basically has a lot of rules. For example, let's say that we want to detect a cat. We have a picture of cat, and basically we can say that oh, cat has whatever feature, etc. And then basically based on that, they will come up an outcome. However, you just imagine if certain characteristics is not that clear, our tradition programming may not be able to give us the desired output. So this is actually the issue because they have not go through the learning process. I mean, learning in terms of the AI, and hence based on our comprehensive rule. Okay, so if we miss out certain point, we may not be able to so-called execute the job properly. So this is actually before the AI. Okay, so basically this is a process of acquire data and turning it into actionable knowledge. Okay, so basically this is important. Based on the data, okay, we will be able to have some form of knowledge, and this knowledge can be actionable. For example, the kid will be able to identify that this is a cat. Okay, so it is about identifying patterns and building model from experience. Okay, so basically this is on learning. let me quickly go through the types of learning. This is what I have mentioned earlier on. Okay, I just want to put it here so that it will be easier for you to compare. Okay, so next will be on the AI learning, machine learning, and deep learning. Okay, what is actually AI learning? Okay, so basically a human actually provide the computer with data and a general learning algorithm. Okay, so basically you can see that you give a picture, okay, which tell that this is actually a cat to a kid. Okay, so basically you actually give a very general learning algorithm. The computer will analyze the data to find patterns and create its own set of rules, okay, which is called a model. It then uses its self-generate rules to make prediction or decision on new data. Okay, so initially, okay, probably when we actually do this AI training with limited data, basically you can say that the outcome may not be that accurate at all. However, with more data and then more so-called patterns, and basically they will be able to create its own sets of rules, then the outcome will be desired. So over here, you can see that there is a strong difference between the type of learning from the tradition programming and the AI learning. So basically for AI learning, we actually has the input. Okay, for example, it can be the picture of a cat. Basically, it will give a output. Basically, we will tell that this is a cat, this is not a cat. And then based on that, the computer actually has some model or some program to know that whether is this a cat or this is not a cat. So basically, you can see that the difference basically on the tradition programming is basically the data, and we have some rules. We set all the rules to say that the cats have whatever characteristics. Then from there, it will have the outcome to say that whether is this a cat or whether this is not a cat. But over here, through the AI learning, again, you can imagine that we have a lot of picture of cats. And then basically we will tell them this is a cat, this is not a cat. And based on that, okay, the computer actually generate a model to decide whether is this a cat or whether it is not a cat. Okay, so basically this is actually AI learning. What is the difference between machine learning? Okay, so machine learning is actually the cornerstone of modern AI. Okay, so instead of being explicitly programmed for every task, machine learning algorithm learn from data. Okay, so later on, I will share you a very simple example to understand the difference between AI, machine, and deep learning. As for deep learning, it's actually a subset of machine learning, which means that deep learning is actually all machine learning, but not all machine learning is deep learning. Okay, so basically, deep learning is a subset of machine learning. Basically, they use artificial neural networks with many layers to learn complex pattern from vast amount of data. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier on my next slide, I will give you a very simple example to let you understand the difference between AI learning, machine learning, and deep learning. However, okay, basically, let me share some application on just using the types of learning. Basically, this is one example. Okay, so a recommend system on Netflix actually learn your viewing habit to suggest new show that you might like. Okay, so basically, if you have watched Netflix or YouTube, they actually learn what is your viewing habit, and basically from there, they will be able to suggest the next video that most likely you will like or most likely you will pick to see. Okay, so basically, these are all the types of learning. Okay, so again, just I mentioned earlier on, basically, I want to give you some understanding on the learning analogy. For example, what is this? For AI, they will say that this is a vehicle. Okay, so vehicle means that it's a general word. Vehicle can be also a bus, can be a motorcycle, can be a lorry, can be a van, etc. But for AI, they will identify this as a vehicle. How about machine learning? Okay, machine learning will identify this as a car. Okay, so machine learning will identify this as a car. And then what is deep learning? Okay, so deep learning will identify this as a sport car. Okay, so basically this is what I mentioned earlier on. Okay, so if you still remember, for deep learning, okay, basically they have a artificial neural network that with many layers, they will be able to learn complex pattern from a lot of vast amount of data. So basically from here you can see that, okay, basically with some characteristics, certain shapes, certain feature of this sport car, this is what can be done by deep learning. Okay, so for machine learning, they probably can tell you that this is for car. That's all. But for AI, again, it will be more generic. It will so-called define this as a vehicle. Okay, hopefully with this, you are able to understand, okay, the learning of this AI, the one of the component. Okay, so guys, urge you before I continue, if you have learned something from this video, urge you to help me by like this video. For those who are new to this channel, please consider to subscribe and turn on your notification bell. Once again, thank you so much for strong support. Let's come to the second component of AI, which is reasoning. What is actually reasoning? Okay, so reasoning is basically we want to draw a conclusion. Whatever that we learn, okay, basically this is what we call the knowledge, and we want to draw a conclusion, okay, based on the data that we actually learn, and then on there we actually draw a conclusion. Reasoning is the ability of AI system to apply logic, okay, for example, certain logic, certain rules, and certain knowledge in order to draw a conclusion and make a informal decision. Okay, let's take the picture of cat for example again. Okay, for example, you have certain characteristics. So basically, you know that you actually acquire certain knowledge, for example, some feature of the cat. So therefore, from there, you will be able to determine and make a informal decision that this is actually a cat. Okay, so this process involves using logical and deductive techniques to process information and arrive at sound outcome. Okay, I come to the three different types of reasoning on my next slide. Okay, so from here you can see that there are actually three different types of reasoning. Okay, so for example, AI system can employ rule-based reasoning. Okay, so certain rules, okay, and then they will decide where they apply predefined rules and logic operator to solve certain problem. Alternative, they can utilize symbolic reasoning, which involve manipulate symbol and relationship to derive new information. Okay, but let's take a close look on the types of reasoning. Okay, so basically these are the three types of reasoning which I'm going to share with you a little bit more detail. Okay, so basically keep this in mind. Reasoning is basically to draw a conclusion based on what we have learned. Okay, so you must remember this, then we will be able to understand and then appreciate what is actually reasoning. As I mentioned, there are actually three types of reasoning. Deductive reasoning. What is this? Okay, basically you actually apply general rules to specific case to reach a guaranteed logical conclusion. Okay, because some rules, for example, let me give you this as a mathematical rules. For example, we write this: if A is bigger than B and B greater than C, and basically you can draw a deductive reasoning that A is actually greater than C. Okay, because since A is bigger than B and if B is greater than C, so hence I will draw a conclusion that A is actually bigger than C. Okay, so basically this is under the deductive reasoning. Next will be on the inductive reasoning. Okay, so this actually make generalized conclusion from specific example. Okay, so basically they draw a conclusion based on certain example. For example, okay, every swan I have seen is all white in color. So therefore, from there, I draw a conclusion that all swans are white. Okay, for example, let's take an example of the cat. For example, I draw a conclusion that all cats must have a tail. Okay, so basically, if something happened to a cat, for example, okay, it has some incident happen, okay, so basically the cat without the tail, then I will not be able to identify this as a cat anymore. So basically, this is what it means here. Since I have know that swarm majority of them, or I shouldn't say majority, since every swarm that I've seen, they are all white, so therefore I draw a conclusion that all swarm are white. But if one is actually black in color, then I will not be able to identify that this is actually the swamp. Okay, so this is what we mean that this is basically based on the probabilistic, okay, basically based on probability, and is actually not guaranteed, which I means that I shared with you earlier on. Okay, so basically, if the cat, okay, all must have tail. If some cat with so-called incident, they may not have tail anymore, and I will not be able to identify them as a cat. So this is what the example about is on the inductive reasoning. Okay, so it mentioned that if all the swarm I seen is all white, so I draw a conclusion that all the swarm will be white. And hence, if there's a swarm that is black in color or other color, then I may not be able to draw a correct conclusion. Next will be on the adductive reasoning. Okay, so basically they form the most likely hypothesis from an incomplete set of observant. Okay, for example, here, okay, for example, the glass is wet. Okay, so the glass is wet, so your guess is probably it just rain. Okay, however, you may have different scenarios. So, for example, okay, somebody can water the glass, for example, or somebody spill the water into the glass. Okay, so basically, this is what it means. It may not be really rain before the glass is wet, but you actually form the most likely hypotenuse. Basically, you just conclude that the glass is wet. Basically, most of the time, it probably will rain. Okay, so basically, this is actually the inference to the best explanation. So this is some form of guessing based on certain logic that you actually interpret. So this is what we know as adductive reasoning. Okay, let's draw a quick conclusion on this here. Okay, so basically, as I mentioned earlier on the reasoning, most important is basically we use the knowledge that we actually gain from learning. Okay, basically we need to make a logical decision. Okay, so basically in short, reasoning is actually the bridge between knowledge and action. Let me give you a further example here to explain what is reasoning. For example, if an AI knowledge is a vast library of book, basically you can see that all these book in the library, basically these are all the training data. What is actually reasoning? Okay, so reasoning is basically, for example, the librarian who can read this book. Okay, basically they will be able to connect the ideas from different volumes, and they will be able to answer a complex question that you just asked. Okay, so basically this is in short. For example, you ask a librarian, okay, with not much knowledge, okay, he or she may not be able to give you a so-called correct reply. However, just imagine this: if all the books are all the data, and then based on that, on the reasoning, the librarian who can read all the books, and let's say he or she are able to connect the ideas, and basically from here, you can imagine that the librarian will be able to answer even a very complex question that you just asked. So basically, this will be the end of this video discussion. Like I mentioned earlier on, look out for my next video of discussion to discuss the rest of the three component of AI. With this, that's all I have. Thank you so much for strong support. I hope to see you guys soon. Bye for now. Thank you so much.